a sequence of paintings which are interrelated, which began with the Hollis, prompted by the Hollis because he was leaving that address in Lloyd Square. And I managed to get an image of him with the door, with the idea of the door motif. So anyway, so there's that one, and then for some unearthly reason I thought of you and Oya. The third one will be Andrew Dempsey, but that doesn't have a door motif in that one. But it does have the nature of our relationship, which I guess these things are also about. He's leaving and he's putting on his jacket and he's smiling. And behind him there will be 1, 2, 3 images, one of which is actually there, which will be making a commentary on his, will be echoing or his activity. It's of her disrobing while he's doing the opposite thing. And then I noticed as I was doing it, and this is entirely accidental and serendipitous is a nice word, is that it's in the bottom left. There's a shape that reminds me of echoes or John Walker series of paintings called the Alba series. And during this conversation, the last conversation we had when Andrew was here, he was telling me how he helped curate that show at the Hayward Gallery. And the paintings that Andrew Dempsey really admired are the Alba series, which Walker did, which is based on Goya's Duchess of Alba. And there it is, there's a fragment of it there, bottom left, which I will be, I hope to keep intact, in the sense of leaving the canvas exposed. So in short, if that's successful, then the next one will be of on the same size canvas as the Oya and Michael Richardson, one of Yehuda Safran, a dear friend and ex-tutor of mine from Goldsmiths and the Royal College of Art, with whom I still keep in regular contact. It's an image of Andrew Dempsey, of him in this very room, leaving this room, hence the donning of his jacket with the red silk lining. So he's putting his arm through the sleeve. I managed to capture him doing that, and there's the image there of a lady quite well known to me doing the opposite, disrobing. So you have an image of two using, so you're creating a dynamic, a pictorial dynamic, one of which I hope there will be many. In his career he was, as we all know, the curator at the Hayward Gallery. Amongst that's what I know about him. I'm sure there's other facets of his life that I can learn about. But so in a way, he was surrounded by paintings, by imagery, by thought and ideas, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So you have this, and they're all my paintings, of course. So he's surrounded by my paintings. Well, it's a painting of mine that he owns, which I thought would put in right behind him. And it's in, the original lamp is in where? Oh God. France. It has its own history for me anyway. And there's a painting like this, and it occurs in several other paintings, one of which has a direct reference to my father. But on this occasion, there will be an ambiguity between, because his face will be illuminated here, because he happened to be facing the window, which is here in my studio. So his face is naturally being illuminated on this side, but there will be a sort of, it could be by the picture itself, do you see? I mean, so there's a sort of metaphysical illumination perhaps. It all sounds rather pretentious, but it's not meant to be. You know, these things happen in paintings all the time. They occur. I don't think that's it. I don't think that's talked about often enough, about the images that are in one's mind, that are there, and they have to be uprooted. They have to be evicted, almost ejected, in the sense that you make them, and then you can rest easily until the next one comes along. Who was the one who? I think it was Bacon who said the images for him are like aeroplanes, you know, banking, just waiting to land. That's a very nice simile, you know, or metaphor for the activity of painting. They're there, you know, hovering around, you know, pestering one like flies, you know, and then they still persist. One of those paintings, the top right, the one, the nude, undressing, was actually there when Andrew was in the room. So it's this idea of truth, and I think I mentioned the last time you hear the Matisse quote: "Exactitude is not the truth." So okay, so that's not the problem. So you have the painting top right, then you have the space around him. Do you leave it empty, or do you include the paintings or the images that are also behind him, but you don't want to be there on this occasion? So, and I don't know why I'm sort of undecided about it or worrying about it, as if that's a great thing to worry about. But in terms of picture making, it is. So if you don't want that image behind him, what would you do? Why don't you put the image that was once there and which he now owns behind him? Ah, very good. That solves that particular problem. So that's the lantern there. And of course, all this is early. And then, so if you have that there, what about the bottom right? Does that remain empty, or will you put the painting in there? And if so, what? Well, why don't you put another painting that represents another aspect of your work, which is the red cloth, which also still happens to be here, bottom right, which also rhymes with the lining of his jacket, you know, which also will play off that. And then, okay, well, there's a gap, top left, there's a too big a gap. What's there? Well, actually, why don't you just put in the powder blue edge of the painting that still hangs there, which fills in. So in other words, you're thinking like that. It's very mechanical, very, it's mechanical, but there's a phrase that a tutor once said to me, you know, making a painting should be like a bird making its nest. And again, it's another image I rather like, in which, do they think about it? And then, of course, you think about the Barnett Newman quote, which is, "Aesthetics is to the artist as ornithology is to the birds." In other words, you don't think about it. So I'm thinking about it. Soon, I hope, this image will get to the point where I don't have to think about it. Then it will all be feathering my nest. So there. Coming along, inching along is my favourite term, as long as it moves somewhere, forward, maybe even sideways. But the thing I was pleased about to discover was that the painting of the lamp in the background, behind him, which is a painting he's very familiar with, when I came to paint the zipper of his bomber jacket, it looked, for a moment, I thought, it's a trick. It looks like he's holding the lamp as if it were a balloon. Now that's one of those wonderful accidents or marvels that, you know, it's a slight marvel, but it's a marvel, or discovery, and which is the reason for why you paint. Oh, I hadn't figured on that. I hadn't. If one had sort of planned it from the beginning, it'd be corny, but the fact that I hadn't, why? Because you're concerned with other things, other elements, if you like, components of a painting. Well, I thought, oh gosh, that's good. It's like he's sort of carrying. I mean, it wasn't meant to be a reflection on him as a sort of not a luminary, that'd be too, but a sort of a good. You can edit this out because I'm sure it will embarrass him, but I regard him as a very good person. He has a good inner light. He's a sort of an enabler, a generous person, which is also a tricky thing to paint. How do you paint it? How do you paint this idea of, what's the phrase? Goodness writes white. In other words, it's boring. It's quite, all the interesting people are bad. Hence, not my fascination, but with the media's fascination with someone like Trump, who's a thoroughly rotten individual, and they can't get enough of him because of precisely that fact. Try writing something about a saint. Well, he was a nice chap, and he died. They killed him for it. End of the story. Anyway, so with this little sartorial detail became transformed into dare I say it, a metaphor for Mr. Dempsey. I was going to quote you a poem actually, which, two poems I forgot to mention, not quote, cite. The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. It says, "So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed by rainwater, beside the white chickens." That, in however many lines they are, is about the whole activity of painting, or a sort of, analogy for it. The other one is, and Wallace Stevens is another great, not influence, but I know his stuff. And it's his poem called The Blue Guitar, which is a poem about Picasso's painting, The Blue Guitar. So it's ekphrastic, lovely Greek word. It's about a poem about a painting. And it says, things as they are changed when they are played upon the blue guitar. So, again, it's a neat way of describing what one is trying to do when you make an image. There's the world, and then there's the version of the world. It's of the world, but not like the world. But it pertains to the world. More than that, I cannot say, for the time being. Oops. Mamma mia che penuria. Very good. I've been asked why, right at the end of a painting, I deface or defile or obliterate, that's my preferred term, the image with a glaze. But the main one is the element of excitement. What will it look like after the image has been tested in this way? What will emerge from it? Usually, as experiences, well, in my opinion, has shown, it emerges enhanced. That's one reason, to surprise oneself. The second reason is a sort of technical thing, where glazes are used in the old days, when they were first invented or used. Titian comes to mind, for example, Rembrandt and other. You applied a glaze when the paint was dry to modulate a tone. Here the paint is wet, all of it, so it's a sort of wet into wet turbo. So the paint's wet and then you apply a glaze onto that, and so things are moving. The paint moves like a gentle seismic shift in the pictorial picture plane, and then you see what happens. You see what it literally emerges when you peel away the Veronica, which is in some cases very good quality Japanese paper, which leaves an offset or a counterproof, as I prefer to call them, and sometimes are intact images in themselves. Usually, after this process of obliteration has happened and the images emerged intact, I usually leave it, but there was but of late I've the elements there that I don't like. In this one, there was something missing, and it was the light, the sort of from the lamp, which, in other words, it had to happen. These things, these marks, these irradiation from the lamp, so I painted them in very carefully to give him the light reflected on his face, which is also coming from the window outside. So it's a double illumination, if you like, or luminosity. This is my now friend, Yehuda Safran, whom I first met at Goldsmiths in 1975. He now lives in New York, which is where I've placed him, leaving his apartment in Greenwich Village, Lowe's Village. Ostensibly, it's a man leaving his apartment, but it's a very odd. As you can see, there's a door opposite. It's a very odd building, or the way these things they're hugger-mugger, and he's at the end of a corridor, so it forms a sort of triangle. overtly obvious that it would end up as a painting several years later, which is, this is not a recent image of him, as in last year. So last time I was in New York, which is 2017. So he's changed a little, but it's essentially him. It's recognisably him. And that, for the time being, is it.